Hi, folks, and welcome to our latest special episode of Aches and Games. Remember, you can check out our monthly shows where we talk life, gaming, and a few other things. Those drop every first Friday of the month. But today we're talking Xbox, specifically what actually is an Xbox these days, how are things looking after the 2025 showcase, and how we feel about the direction the whole thing's going in. I'm Giles Nicholson, Charles Wentwest on socials, Xbox and PlayStation. Joining me, as always, is my good friend James Hopes. James, ready to deep dive into everything Team Green?
Good evening, Charles. I'm wearing a green T-shirt, so that's my little segue into talking about Xbox, which is nice. I know what the theme is tonight, which is a bonus. Don't know the details. I'm not that prepared because I've got a bit of hay fever and feel a bit rough. But hey ho, everyone knows about Xbox, so I'm sure I'll blag my way through it quite happily. Had one for years. Great console. We'll come on to that, I'm sure, no doubt. I'm James, went to school with Giles. James Boy 90 sent me out on the PlayStation Network, which is my primary console. And then James Boy 78 with some random numbers on Xbox, which I'm still on, mainly with my son Joshua. Good evening.
Excellent. Well, that's a promising start, isn't it, everybody? That at least one of us is prepared. But, you know, we pride ourselves on being sort of semi-professional podcasters.
Do we?
So, yeah. Well, sort of one professional, one unprofessional. It sort of balances out, doesn't it? And it also goes backwards and forwards. Who's the professional one each time? Anyway, let's go cracking. And interesting, you said your primary is PlayStation, so we will certainly cover that. But it's also maybe telling, I think, that we should probably start by asking what exactly is an Xbox these days. You know, you've got the console itself. You've got the games being released to all kinds of places. You've got Xbox games on PC day one. What do you think of when we say the word Xbox, James?
Used to be easy in the olden days, didn't it? Used to be a box of X on it. And it was a console and you play some games on it. But now it's pretty much anything, isn't it? We always get adverts on the TV these days, on my LG TV, saying this is an Xbox. And obviously we've got the new handheld bits coming out, which was announced recently, which is obviously the big branding behind that one is this is an Xbox. So, and I do play a lot of Xbox stuff on my PC. So with Xbox Game Pass, I've got the Ultimate version. It's called Ultimate, isn't it, the best one? And that one includes all the PC stuff. So I play a lot of Xbox games on PC. So Xbox isn't what it used to be. It's a concept these days. It's a it's a holistic thing in the world somewhere, made by Microsoft, encouragingly, but it could be anything really these days, isn't it? Which makes it a bit different than PlayStation.
Exactly, yeah. If we were younger, we'd say Xbox is a vibe, no doubt. But I'm not sure we can quite get away with that at our esteemed age. Yeah, like you said, very different from PlayStation. They've got a very different route, through necessity probably, because they weren't doing very well as a console, straight up console. But yeah, I think that's an interesting start. That Xbox has gone in a particularly weird direction, which we'll talk about. PlayStation's still very much a console first, with things coming to PC fairly sporadically and usually after a time. And Nintendo is Nintendo ever since the Wii, at least. So three very different approaches, and the Xbox approach, yes, evolving, shall we say?
You're more of an Xbox guy, aren't you? You would say, if you had to pick one.
Yes.
Why is that, Giles? Where did it come from? Why are you so loyal?
That is a very good question. Well, first of all, we shouldn't be loyal to big corporate, especially someone like Microsoft. I think they've got either the biggest or the second biggest market capitalization certainly in the US, probably in the world. They're a huge company, and they don't need or deserve my loyalty. But it's a good question. I think the reason I tend to, the console is still my console. My main console is in the living room. It's the one I've got two controllers for, so I tend to play with Hannah. But it's also, I like the controller, which we've discussed. We differ in that area. The controller feels good. But the main thing, I think, is the combination of things. It's the fact that it's more than a console. So the ecosystem for me is part of the appeal. You can kind of move around with cloud saves. So there was a period where Hannah and I weren't living together yet, and we had a Series S over here and a Series X at my old flat, and you could just, as long as you made sure the game saved, you could just pick up where you were on each console. That's pretty cool. That's not at all effortless on PlayStation, or wasn't the last time I tried. The sort of integrated party system and the integrated kind of friends list and chat used to be appealing when I used to use it. Now I'm a solitary beast most of the time. And then, yeah, I think the other thing I would say is that things like Game Pass has just been a sort of unarguable value for me, and the reason why, yeah, still as a console, the Series X was the console I bought day one. PlayStation I bought a bit later, and that's been the case for a few generations now. But there's plenty of good reasons not to be, James. How about you? Why you tend to use it more as a backup, don't you, or as a second console, and also play a lot on PC?
Yeah, I don't know why. It's a weird one. We've mentioned in previous episodes. Have a read, listen back. They're great. Some of them are really good. Some of them are awful, but some of them are really good. So for my 40th birthday, my wife Sarah was trying to think of something to get me, having run out of every possible option after 15 years of relationship. So in the end, I said, "Why don't we go for a console for the house?" Because we used to have just a Wii to play fun little games on at Christmas and stuff, but we never had a proper console. So I said, "Why don't we get a console?" So as I always did when I was a child, I looked into it for weeks and months, and then deciding which one was the best console to go for. And at the time, I picked the Xbox One S, the white one, with a nice little grid on the back, because it was best capability wise. Game Pass seemed really good, and it seemed to have all the stuff on it, and it looked cool. So we went for an Xbox, weirdly. And then when my son got to lockdown, we all got into gaming a bit. He started playing on it. He took over the Xbox and was on it most of the time. I didn't really get a chance to play it much, so I thought, what else can I do? So as you know, I started buying and selling consoles, managed to find a PlayStation 4 on the very cheap. It was like 80 quid at the time. So I picked up a PlayStation 4, had a go. That was something I could do on my own without Joshua holding the Xbox. And I've been a PlayStation boy ever since, really. And PlayStation, for some reason, for me, just feels a lot cooler.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Shout out to the Xbox fans listening. Yeah, no, I think certainly in Europe, I mean, you look at the sales, you look at the marketing. PlayStation is, I think, a cooler brand. Xbox feels quite a US centric brand still. Does terribly in the Japanese market, and in some European markets, I think it's barely got any presence. Apparently, in the UK, it's a bit better, but still, sorry, Xbox. This is. I'm not sure if I said PlayStation. I got confused. So yeah, I think in terms of how well the brand's doing, how visible it is, it was very much a sort of the time that PlayStation really took off again was at the start of the PlayStation 4 generation. It's when games started to be online, games started to be digital or more mainstream. And I think then, groups of friends started getting the same console, and Xbox certainly got marginalized. But one of the things I would say, certainly in terms of just thinking about the console itself or what's available on the console, is that it used to be a big trade-off in terms of the games that were available. PlayStation, I think, had such a range of really brilliant single player games in particular that sort of appealed to a kind of mainstream audience, action adventure types. And Xbox just didn't have the quantity or quality of games across the last generation and into the start of this one. And I think that has changed. So that is something that's improved. There's still obviously with Xbox bringing a lot of their games to PlayStation, then there's an argument that you get everything over on that side of things. But I would say increasingly it's a choice, and that Xbox and the game studios and through Game Pass and the studios they've acquired has become a more attractive option. So yeah, absolutely wouldn't begrudge anyone having sort of picked PlayStation in the last few years. I think it was the right choice, honestly. But from my point of view, I think I've got the library that I've built up. Game Pass works for me, and then all those sort of quality of life things around the console ecosystem really make it. But how much longer? I think that's a really good question because, like you said, or like we said, sorry, games coming to PlayStation. I've started playing on PC a bit more because I've got a ROG Ally, but maybe that's an Xbox. and just yeah, I'm much less loyal. I'm enjoying sort of playing across all kinds of different platforms with different controllers. I'll even come around to the haptics one day and those stupid triggers.
It's weird though, because Xbox technology seems to always be slightly better than the PlayStation technology when it comes out. So if you're a tech person, then the Xbox, which is why I picked it in the first place, because it sounded a bit more technologically advanced. And the interface is good, and Game Pass is much better than the PlayStation version. I just don't know why people prefer PlayStation, but I'm one of those people, so I really don't get it. It's a feeling. I've always liked
Yeah.
Sony. I've always been a Sony boy, I suppose, when I was younger. Sony always had an exciting, cutting-edge feel to it, whereas Microsoft always had a sort of a turgid PC Windows meh to it. So maybe it's the branding. Who knows? Maybe if Sony made the Xbox, then it'd be a lot more popular. Who knows? Fascinating.
Life would be different. Yeah, that would be an interesting thought process, thought experiment, even. Yeah, and you're not alone, because I think it's fair to point out, console sales of the Series X and S are pretty bad. They've and at one point they were doing much better than last generation, but now I think they're actually even falling behind the Xbox One generation. And in part that's because I think Microsoft has made it very clear they're not particularly bothered about selling consoles anymore. They just want to sell services and sell games wherever you play. That's part of the sort of vision that I think we're going to talk about. But yeah, when it comes to the console itself, definitely very much the less popular sibling available to people.
It could just be because the PlayStation controller is a lot better.
It could be that. It could be that. But popular, as we're seeing around the world, popular doesn't necessarily mean good. Anyway, probably need to skirt that one to avoid the absolute comments that we will get through. Okay, so we've talked about the console a little bit. In terms of the console itself, as I said, my point of view is it's a good bit of kit. It sounds like yours is too. In terms of the technology, they haven't quite leveraged the power that's available in it, and I think that's an interesting challenge for Xbox. But what about the games? You mentioned games and Games Pass. I'm sure it will change name fairly soon, because Xbox do love a branding change and they like to make it more complicated. So it's probably called like X Pass Super Core or something fairly soon. But yeah, we just had the 2025 showcase. We're coming off a really strong year on Xbox and on Game Pass in the first half of the year. What are your thoughts on the current kind of state of the games available?
Yeah, I mean, for a while now, certainly this year, the Xbox Game Pass stuff has generally had a lot more day one releases, like Indiana Jones was quite a big one, obviously, we got into recently, and stuff like Atomfall, and obviously Blueprints is on both. But loads of big name first games come out straight away. Even Black Ops 6, didn't it, came out on day one on Xbox Game Pass. So there's some massive games on there. You could easily just use Game Pass and not ever buy anything ever again, which is pretty much how it's gone for me over the last few years. I bought a few PlayStation games, weirdly, because they're harder to get on the PlayStation subscription, but the Xbox one's always been much better. The range of games each month is really good. Like I said, apart from the day one releases, you also get lots of the older stuff as well. So many games on Game Pass, it's ridiculous. So it is a really impressive subscription service. I don't even know the price for it anymore. I just pay it, so I don't know how it compares with the Sony one. But yeah, you can't really knock Xbox in terms of the things they offer. And like I said, the ability to cross over and play on the PC has been a massive boost for me, especially those kind of games that work better on the PC. So stuff like City Skylines 2 works miles better on a PC than it ever would on a console with a controller. So I much prefer playing those Game Pass games on a PC. Even Hellblade 1 I played on a PC, because I think my graphics card on my PC is now better than the one on the Xbox. So it just looked a bit cooler playing it through the PC, even though it's probably exactly the same. But there we go. Yeah, so Game Pass, awesome. Very impressed with it always. And it seems to be going from strength to strength, to be fair.
Yeah, no, I'd agree, and in a way, that's arguably part of the problem. That certainly for Microsoft, they're getting the subscription money. That's great for developers who are in Game Pass. I understand that the sort of numbers are good. You tend to get some kind of upfront figure to help you with development. You get a marketing push, and then it's based on engagement. So lots of really strong success stories there. But I did notice, especially when it comes to indies that I'm interested in, I think you mentioned, was it called Indica or something? It was a weird sort of
Russian nun.
horror. Yeah. And that was a great example where if that had hit Game Pass, I would have played it straight away. And if Game Pass hadn't existed, I probably would have spent I think it was like 10 or 15 quid, because it sounded really interesting. But although Game Pass is helping me experience those sorts of games in Game Pass for free, which is amazing, or included in the subscription, I should say, because there will be comments. It does mean that if you're not in the subscription, I think that's a real challenge. So there's become a bit of a sort of two-tier system, although Xbox, Microsoft are very keen to point out you can still buy things, and that's a perfectly viable route. For a gamer like me, I think it has actually changed my behaviour. Experimenting with more stuff, which is good, but also potentially, if you're not in the subscription, you're less likely to be something I manage to play, which is probably a shame for some indies if they don't get on the sub.
Yeah, like I said, I've only bought PlayStation games in the last 2 years because it's going to take a bit longer to appear on the PlayStation. So if you want something that's just come out, you pay a bit of money for it. So Christmas and birthdays and vouchers and stuff, I've always bought PlayStation games rather than Xbox ones because Xbox has too much to choose from already. And weirdly, like we said before, last month, didn't we, that Claire Obscure game, which is really good. Obviously, it sold like 4 million copies, pretty much all of which would be on the PlayStation because it's free on Game Pass day one. So you've still got 4 million people that have splashed a cash on the actual game to play it on the PlayStation, even though you could play it for free on Xbox. So yeah, obviously the brand loyalty is there for both sides. And if you want to actually buy a game, you're more likely to do so on PlayStation, it appears, because you're less likely to get on the subscription. It's a fascinating way of doing it.
Well, funny you mention that, James, because one of the things Microsoft has realised is that they can sell you more games on PlayStation potentially, and that seems to be working out for them. I think Forza Horizon 5, so it's about a 2-year-old game, was one of the top-selling games on PlayStation in April. You mentioned Indiana Jones. There's been a number of others: Doom, Dark Ages, Oblivion, obviously Minecraft, because Minecraft's on everything and will not die. But I think half of the top 10 on PlayStation last month were Xbox or Microsoft Studios, one way or another, which is really extraordinary. And, again, shows that from their point of view, I guess they don't care if you buy their console or someone else's console, as long as you buy their games or subscribe. So it makes sense. Loads of games in this showcase that's just gone, 2025 showcase. My point of view, I wrote about this, didn't I, on our website?
Great.
If you've not had a look, thank you very much. If anyone hasn't had a look, I mean, it's a bit out of date now, but it was what I wanted to see in the showcase this year. I think I got about 2.5 out of 5 of the things I wanted. So, that's not bad. I'm not going to be petulant about it. It's not Christmas morning and I'm going to throw my toys out the pram. But generally, I thought it was a bit less of a wow factor than last year, where they really showed off some pretty exciting announcements and things. But we weren't short of games, were we? Was there anything that caught your eye in this year's showcase?
Yeah. I mean,
on to next.
They previewed my favourite series, Rat Simulator 2025.
They did.
Yeah, so the new Playtale game called Resonance, Playtale Legacy. So it doesn't focus on Amisa and Hugo. If you played the game, you'd know why. But it does focus on a character from the game. So I think the pirate lady that took them around to different places is the main character in the new game. And it's set quite a way before Amisha was even born. So that's the legacy part of it, how it's built up. So it looks good. Again, graphically good, new character, similar story. I'm sure there's loads of rats in it. Must be loads of rats in it. There's always rats in it.
I was going to say that. I mean, what is, if it's a Plague Tale game without rats? Because obviously the macula, as it called, is very linked to Hugo. So I presume we will see rats, but would your enjoyment be, what's the word, commensurate with the number of rats available? If there's no rats, there's like no rats, no party.
It sounds a bit like they stumble upon the origin of the plague when they're exploring some Incan ruins or Mayan ruins or some kind of ruins from the olden days, as plunderers do on pirate ships and the like. But hopefully I also stumble on loads of rats. Well, there's loads of rats in the old days. There's always rats everywhere. So yeah, you can't have a game that mentions the plague without having rats in it. So that's my anchor, hopefully.
That's a fair point. And very easy to stumble on rats if they're in the numbers that are in the first two games, I guess. Excellent. Yeah, I paid that one. I think that's due for 2026, which I was a bit disappointed. I was really hoping when I saw it and that I completely misread it as 2025, and so that was a bit of a letdown. But let it kick, and based on the first two, I will be playing that one as well. Anything else that stood out for you? Highlights? I've got a couple.
Yeah, Grounded 2. Grounded was good. That's like a garden bug simulator rather than a rat simulator. That's a good game. You're quite small. You're in a place and you do some things. I played it with Joshua year before last, I think, on the Xbox. We both enjoyed that one. So Grounded 2 looks really cool. So can't remember if it's this year or next year. And obviously they announced another Call of Duty, Black Ops 7. So 2 Black Ops in a row for the first time ever, maybe in the Black Ops history, potentially.
So, yeah.
I suppose it looks a bit trippy, so it's meant to be a bit less realistic and more sort of mind-bending stuff. Although the last one was a bit mind-bendy, if you recall some of the weird levels in that one. There we go, that's next year as well. So there wasn't that much from this year that's coming urgently, apart from loads of shooter games, and I'm not a massive shooter game person anymore. And Xbox seems to be, in history, very famous for really popular shooter games. Like Halo and all that kind of stuff, so...
Halo and Gears, yeah.
Yeah, whereas PlayStation for me is more about adventure games, which is why I got into PlayStation. The shooting stuff isn't really my bag, so that's why the real big announcements don't really float my boat as such.
There you go. Yeah, interesting. I think Outer Worlds 2 might appear to be a shooty, and apparently the shooting is very good, but as a role-playing game, I loved the first one. Again, unfortunately, one of the things I liked about it was that it was quite short and contained, and I think this is going to be sort of bigger and more expensive, which for me in particular would be a bit of a shame, but hopefully not too big, not too expensive. But that does look really good. And Clockwork Revolution, I thought as well, another RPG, had a sort of kind of steampunky type vibe, a bit of a time mechanic that you could kind of rewind. You could be the gaming equivalent of Cher and turn back time, and hopefully sort of change the past to change the future, all that sort of good stuff. So every time they've shown that, I think that's looked impressive. But for me, yeah, it was a couple of weirder little entries that caught my eye. Planet Blana 2, I really enjoyed the first one. It's a bit of a limbo / inside 'em up, so sort of side-scrolling puzzle platformer type. A bit more cheery than those, certainly a brighter colour palette. But I enjoyed the first one of those, so looking forward to that. Again, 2026, sadly. And No Ghosts at the Grand.
That looks quite fun.
This one? Yeah, no, bonkers.
Yeah.
I was kind of on board when the guy sort of randomly started singing, and I was like, oh wow, I don't think I've ever played a musical. This sounds fun. Then it looked a bit like Power Wash Simulator, and then it looked a bit like some kind of escape room mystery thing. I've got no idea what's going on in that game, but I want to play it.
Yeah, the description was pretty mysterious, sort of cleaning, architecture, decorating, building game, but with a storyline built into it with some kind of mystery horror stuff. Who knows? But it looked cool. But again, next year as well, wasn't it? I think next year.
Yeah, everything's next year. Yeah. I mean, we have heard that we're getting Ninja Gaiden Black, Ninja Gaiden 4, Outer Worlds, Tony Hawk's next month, Gears Reloaded, Black Ops will be this year. I assume Black Ops will be this year.
So next year as well, I think.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Even though that much fun.
Yeah, that was next year.
There we go. So lots of good stuff. Oh no, I've got a error.
Yeah, you've gone completely now.
Cool. So you were saying Black Ops, you think is next year, when we were rudely interrupted by the technical gremlins. Apologies, listeners. So lots of stuff next year, and actually to close it out before the Black Ops reveal, which I thought was a little bit disappointing because I thought it looked really cool and was something new, and it does look really cool and is Black Ops, which will be good. But I felt like it was something kind of brand spanking new. Phil Spencer came on and said next year we'll have Fable, Forza, Gearsy Day, and something new that's been with us since day one, which sounds a lot like Halo. So the bit I cannot understand is how to fit all that stuff into 2026. Because with that, with another Call of Duty, and with all the stuff we've just talked about, it's going to be a very busy year. So I've increased my subscription until 2027. So job done.
Yeah. The only thing on there that seemed to be coming soon was the DLC for Indiana Jones and the Great Circle.
Yes, which
How's
will
that?
not be included in the subscription. Will you buy it?
Yeah. The Order of Giants DLC. It's always weird, I find, when our new DLC comes out sometime after the game, because obviously we've both completed the game, so I don't think I'd bother now. If it came out during the game, then I would have played it, but now it's come out after the game. I can't imagine going back because it feels weird. Who knows?
I don't usually buy DLC, especially if it's something I play through Game Pass, because obviously if it were to leave, not that the first party stuff should, but if it were to leave, you can't play it. I think I bought the Escape Academy DLC when it was in Game Pass. That's the only thing. So I wouldn't normally, but I think if there's one thing, if it's decent length and it's well reviewed, I think if there's one game that I'd play more of, it's probably indie. So good thing to point out. Thank you. Right, so that's the console, the games. We talked a bit about the sort of ecosystem more widely in general. Established that it's more than just an Xbox. Anything else to add in terms of the sort of the current offering? You mentioned you play a lot on PC, James. So presumably the fact that Game Pass Ultimate lets you play on both consoles, I'd imagine that's quite a strength.
Yeah, no, definitely. The setup in our new games family extravaganza has everything on HDMI cable, so it's all plugged into the big TV and it just works. So it's just as easy to play it on PC as it is to play it on Xbox or PlayStation or Switch or anything else we've got set up in there. So nice and easy. And like I said, some games just work better on PC. Stuff that's traditional, good for mouses and keyboards and stuff, just play better on PC than ever on console. Oh, one thing that annoyed me, completely off subject, but I was playing House Flipper 2, as you'll find out on our next episode that we record later this month, on the PlayStation. It's a great game. I love House Flipper, but the controls are just so miserable on a console. It's just horrific. Just placing things on a shelf is like the most infuriating thing known to man. So yeah, those kind of games, if they're on Game Pass, I'm in the perfect swap over to play on the PC, so you can whip a mouse out and be a bit more elegant with your control system. So yeah, stuff like that, perfect. Obviously, I've got a lot more memory space on my PC as well. The Xbox tends to get filled up quite quickly with big games because the storage isn't massive. So if Josh's games on there and my games on there, it doesn't really fit a lot. But that's also another bonus of playing it on the PC. You can just put infinite games on there and just play them whenever I fancy it. So yeah, definite bonus. Not really something you get with PlayStation much with the PC crossovers, although obviously more and more games getting ported across to the PC. But Xbox, always day one stuff is always on the PC, which I love.
Nice. Yeah, I really value the flexibility. I mentioned there was a time where we had Xboxes in both houses, which was a bit flash, but quite cool. And now I've got a ROG Ally, the original ROG Ally. So that's a handheld gaming PC, which means that, say, if I'm playing Clair Obscur, for example, I mean, it just about runs as long as you take the settings down a little bit. But I can go away from the TV if anyone wants to watch something, or if we're away from the house, I can play a little bit, grind a little bit on that on the ROG Ally. And like I said, as long as you make sure that your save works and maybe you shut down quick resume just to make sure that there's no conflicts, it's really amazing. It's seamless, and you're bringing all your achievements across. You can carry on where you left off. The cloud saves, play anywhere. If you were to buy something, that you can play it on both console or both places, that's just incredible. So yeah, I think what Xbox is trying to do makes a lot of sense to me. I think they sort of had to some extent, but they do have something to offer. It's just if people sort of understand and value that, really, that's kind of the question, and it's quite confusing to my mind anyway. You mentioned your TV is an Xbox, but if you had bought lots of Xbox games in the past, you wouldn't necessarily be able to play them on your TV. So it isn't clear, I think, is the problem.
Yeah, and also we said before, didn't we, that they put up their prices for the Xbox console quite dramatically, whereas PlayStation knocked theirs down in their days of play sale, so they went completely different directions. So certainly not going to encourage anyone to buy an Xbox when the company promoting it, putting the price up and telling you to go and buy all the other types of places you can play an Xbox on. So all a bit weird in terms of marketing and the future. So the worry for me is that obviously in the past it's Sega and Nintendo pushing each other against the technological boundaries to make stuff bigger and brighter and better and pushing it forward and to keep the prices down. And similarly, it's been Microsoft and Sony for the last few years doing the same kind of thing. But if Microsoft decides not to bother pushing the console market forward and just goes for a handheld and a TV and a fridge and a microwave that you can play Xbox games on, and Sony carries on with consoles, then there'd be no real point in Sony pushing the envelope massively forward and no point in keeping the prices down because there's no competition to go up against. So I think it's going to sort of affect the market in a lot of ways because there's no obvious competition for Sony anymore in the future unless Microsoft do go back to making another console at some stage. Who knows?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think you definitely don't want one really dominant party. We've seen what arrogant Sony looks like. The PlayStation 3, I think when they announced it, and it was like $700. I'm going to say $700 or £600 at launch, and they got asked what fans should do, and the guy laughed and said, "Get a second job." Not sure that was great. PR, but they're doing okay now. But yeah, I think the sort of arrogance, the sort of complacency, and the just the lack of appetite that can come from being kind of comfortably first. I mean, I'd argue PlayStation maybe is in that position already, and maybe the competition comes through places like Steam, which is doing really well, and things like the Steam Deck and other potentially sort of home console type machines from Steam could mix it up potentially. There's always a new entrant at some point. I mean, Sony was that at one point, wasn't it? After the Nintendo and Sega days.
Yeah, didn't we talk about it, didn't we? That they only got into making consoles because they're meant to have been helping Nintendo out by launching a console, and then Nintendo screwed them over and went with Philips instead of them. So Sony thought, bugger it, let's go and make a PlayStation instead of that Nintendo stuff. So that's where they started from. So there's always hopefully another person in the market. My only concern will be, obviously, with Donald Trump coming into the phone market now that it's slapped on the tariffs and making his own gold mobile phone, whether there be a Trump station in a couple of years' time, if he still goes well. Get the tariffs on Sony and everyone else and get a new Trump console in gold. Who knows?
I'm really doing my best not to take the bait, James, but I should not be. I think I could fairly reliably say I won't be partaking in a Trump station. And I think if you were to buy one of those phones, I would just look under the label and see who's actually making it. And how much you probably could have bought it without the garish branding.
Anyway.
It's lovely. It's a lovely thought. You mentioned.
I was going to say my other weird point is that the branding-wise, Xbox or Microsoft have always gone in a weird direction with name calling.
Yes.
Whereas Sony is really obvious. You've had a PlayStation 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So you know what you're going to get. You know which one's the most modern one. You know which one drops in price when it all happens. Whereas Microsoft has gone a really weird direction, didn't they? We had the Xbox 360 and then the Xbox One, then a 1S and a 1X, and then a Series S and a Series X. And if you were just looking at it, you wouldn't be able to work out using your brain which one was the newest or best out of all those lot. They've really diversified to the extent you've got no idea what's going on.
Yeah, let's not forget that they've taken Game Pass, which was a fairly straightforward message, which is everything's included. You get our games day one, and they've now got Game Pass Ultimate. They've got Game Pass Standard, which is the console.
Oh dear, Jail's disappeared again. It's very lonely doing a podcast on your own again. You can't rely on people these days. Hey.
I think it might be the heat.
Yeah.
I think just everything's overheating.
Your sweat's getting into the cables.
It could be, yeah. You might have noticed me wiping my brow every now and again. Okay, let's try that again, listeners. We got some technical gremlins, so apologies for any horrific edits that I've managed to try and do there. we were just talking about the naming convention and how it's extended to confusion over Game Pass, where they've introduced Standard, which is the console basic version, but doesn't include games day one from their own catalog, which seems weird. If you do effectively the same subscription on PC, which is just PC only, similar price, you do get days game one. And then there's Core as well, which makes very little sense. And it's only got a couple of games in it, and really it's just to replace Xbox Live. So yeah, it does feel sometimes like Xbox is doing their best to confuse any kind of potential customers. And I think, again, that is possibly comes back to the fact that they are Microsoft and they are a massive company where I'd imagine things like what should we call the console probably goes to about 60 people before everyone's happy. I think they did, to be fair to them, have a little bit of a challenge because the Xbox came in, the first one, so not the one, but the first one. Hopefully everyone's keeping up at home. Came in at the PlayStation 2 era, so they were always one number behind. And I think that's always, from a marketing point of view, they never want to be like the Xbox 3 when it's the PlayStation 4 because it looks inferior. But why they didn't just jump a number and just think, screw it, they could have easily done that. That would have been the answer to me. And yes, they are increasingly confusing in their naming. Speaking of which, you mentioned that the new, I'm going to try and describe it rather than use the name, because otherwise it kind of proves my point a bit too early. But the new handheld, which is Xbox branded but made by ROG or ROG, I have an ROG Ally first generation here in front of me. But what is being released this holiday, this Christmas, is either the ROG Xbox Ally or the ROG Xbox Ally X. So hopefully everyone understands the difference between those two and the ROG Ally, which doesn't have the Xbox bit in it. I think there is also an ROG Ally X from memory. So you've now got four very similar looking handheld devices, which do ever so slightly different things, but realistically are all just handheld PCs, just with different branding.
Yeah, but none of them have got the letter S in them, weirdly.
Yet. Don't give them ideas, James. They'll be an S soon.
But there's no normal series, are there? It's just a Series S and a Series X. There's no just series. So having a ROG Ally Xbox X and then a non-S makes no sense either. None of it makes sense. Microsoft.
Yeah.
Windows 95, Windows 98, Windows 2000, Windows 8, 7, 8, 10. Anyway, Muppets.
That's a good point. They jumped 9, didn't they? I think they went 7, 8, 10. So they can do it. They could have done it with Xbox. Anyway, we digress slightly, and inevitably our connection's going to drop at some point. So I don't want to make it happen again. You mentioned about the future, though. Just in terms of where things are going, if you, I don't know how kind of up to speed you are with the sort of suggestions that potentially other storefronts might be coming to the next Xbox console or on PC, that potentially what will come to PC, which is starting with the Xbox Ally X, is a sort of more console type front end that you can play on. So that sort of idea of convergence, everything coming together, and also Microsoft opening up to other storefronts. Would that interest you? That's certainly something that grabs my attention.
Yeah, I think it's a natural future, isn't it? Microsoft being a big Windows thingy and having lots of computering background, the fact it's all come together makes perfect sense. So it's taken a long time, but it's finally sort of got there. Lots of Steam's massively successful, as are lots of other front ends. So it kind of makes sense that the same games would be available on the same device. So I can't see an issue with it particularly. I can't say that massively draw me towards it because it's not that massively difficult going to the PC and going to Steam rather than getting on a different way of getting to Steam. And handhelds for me never really massively float my boat. I know they have done for you, but for me the Switch is just something I play very infrequently on holidays, so I can't imagine I'd play a Xbox ROG any more often than I would play the Switch. So not something that appeals to me at all because I like it on a massive screen. And due to my massively failing eyes, then I need it to be as big as possible to see it. So for me to have a handheld, it would need to be the size of a normal computer for me to see it in my lap. Anyway, so no, if that was the answer. Was that the right answer? That question?
Yeah.
Can't remember what the question was. Who knows?
Whatever the question was, the answer is no. That's fair enough. But it does appeal to me. I think Xbox effectively has to do it because I think now they're in a position where if they were just a kind of dwindling number of users, developers would develop less for the console. And I think that yeah, by doing this, by having Steam on your console, that again is a big differentiator from the PlayStation side of things. Cheekily means that you can kind of technically play PlayStation games on the Xbox if that is something that comes to pass. And like you said, leveraging the fact that they really seem to be, I think, arguably more focused on the PC sort of ecosystem than they are on the console itself. But the thing that strikes me is if they're going to give up being the only storefront where they get 30% of every sale, it's probably going to be quite a costly machine. So that's also going to feature into it, I'm sure.
Yeah, I suppose it's going to be the only way that you're ever going to play The Last of Us on an Xbox of some description is by making it available on a PC and then making it available through Steam on your storefront on the Xbox. So yeah, whether you want one of the 15 different versions of The Last of Us, you might be in luck finally after Christmas.
Excellent. Well, I don't know about you. I've frozen on my own screen, so I'm hoping
you've been frozen for ages.
That's a great sign. I'm just looking wistfully off into the distance if you're listening on audio. Hopefully that doesn't mean that we're going to have to record this whole thing and we'll Frankenstein's monster it together. In summary, James, assuming that we're still here and I'm not a ghost in some kind of twist to this story, sounds to me like Xbox has not been the most straightforward and understandable company to follow. But it sounds like it might not be your main, but you've had some good times on Xbox, whether on console or PC.
Yeah, I think the whole thing has been confusing because I'm a PlayStation boy and I'm wearing a green shirt. You're an Xbox boy and you're wearing a blue shirt.
Sure.
My original experience on the Xbox was the 360, wasn't it? When we lived together, I think we had a 360 at some stage between us. Yeah. And my fond and then very unfond memory of it was I fished out of the loft, plugged it in, it still worked. All the games still worked perfectly. And I thought, great, I can sell it on eBay. So I got some money on eBay. It arrived at the purchaser's house, and within minutes they complained that it had the red ring of death, which it did. So having lived in the loft for 15 years quite happily, put it in the post and it died on the way to its transit point. So that soured me towards the Xbox history even further than it is now. Anyway, but yeah, like you said, PlayStation is definitely the console for me because it's cooler. Controller's much better. I love it. I love adventure games. The Xbox definitely has its place, particularly for Joshua, but also for lots of stuff that's on the day one releases. So for me, having both in the household and having both subscription services is dreamy for me because you get the best of every possible world. And long may it continue.
Isn't that lovely? Convoyeur moment to end on. Yeah, I think I echo all of that. The only thing I would say from a geeky point of view, from my point of view as someone who's interested in the industry as well as the games, I think it's been really interesting watching Microsoft kind of flail around looking for a new strategy seemingly every few months, if not years. The confusion, but they are trying new things. And I think, if one of them comes off, and I think this kind of convergence idea could be the one, then I think it'll be interesting next generation. Otherwise, it feels a bit like watching the T-1000 at the end of Terminator 2 in the molten steel, trying desperately to form into something as he sort of slides down into oblivion. So as a console owner with a decent collection, I hope that's not the case, but I'm sure we will talk about it if it does happen.
Just one more little point. Weirdly, a while ago, Xbox were quite revolutionary with their consoles because they had the Xbox Connect, didn't they? Which was motion tracking, quite fun. I used to really enjoy my Xbox Connect. Obviously, Nintendo took it forward and made everything better. And then they kind of gave up on it. And then PlayStation tried VR, and they've still tried it, but Xbox never bothered trying with VR. So they've kind of given up with all the add-ons and techie bits with their consoles. So obviously they've spent all their time and investment in making this new handheld and moving in a completely different direction. Whereas Sony are still seem to be trying lots of things. So hats off for Sony for trying new things with their consoles, and boo hiss for Microsoft for giving up.
Yeah, well, we might talk about VR in the future special because I think that's a potential interesting topic. But please do tune in for those specials, folks. We and for our regular monthly shows. James mentioned the next one is due in a couple of weeks, so first Friday of every month. Aches and Games Monthly. Every now and again, we'll do specials such as this one. Please like and subscribe. Check out our website, achesandgames.co.uk. As hesitantly as he always gets it wrong, where we've been putting up a few reviews and features. There was a nice Silent Hill 2 review I remember as well, James.
Yeah.
And check out our socials. James, any final thoughts to say goodbye to our listeners?
No, I've just got to finish off the Atom 4 Day 1 release Xbox review. That'll be on there shortly as well. Good old Xbox for their Day 1 releases. Love it. But that's it. If you want to watch the video in full, pop over to YouTube and you can see Joel's frozen face for the last 20 minutes, which if you enjoy faces being frozen, looking wistfully into the middle distance, then you'll love it. But I was here and I sang a song halfway through as well. So if that's in there, then enjoy that as well. So thanks for joining us. And we'll see you at the next special and the next monthly.
Cheers, everyone. Bye.
Bye. The minute you walked in the joints, I could see you were a man of distinction, a real big spender, good looking, so refined. Say, wouldn't you like to know what's going on in my mind? There we go. Just thought I'd fill the void. Lovely. Thought about the speaking clock with Joshua the other day. That was an interesting one. Remember that one? There he is.
Cool.
Oh, sideways, but yeah.
Oh no. Oh no. Now you're sideways on mine, which is really weird. Oh,
Yeah.
God, what is going on?